Okay, so a quick little recap of how we can do some different types of selection. In one of the previous movies, I took you through that you can either single click to select a surface or a line, you can double click to select a surface and all of the lines that are connected to it, and you can triple click to select all of a 3D object. And you can see here that this extra box that I've put over on the side here isn't selected because it isn't directly connected to that 3D object of the house. Now, if I wanted to also select this object as well, one of the easiest ways to do that, and I'll just deselect everything by clicking once, is that with my arrow or my selection tool, I can left click and drag and then let go, and that will select everything in there. And that can be a handy feature. But you do have to be careful sometimes, because if you've got a really complex environment, lots of different models, and you can only sort of get so many views and so many perspectives, and you want to select just this object and not that one, then that drag selection is not going to be a good option for you, because you can't just select this one without also selecting that one. So you can play around with the different tools to see what works best for you. So what I want to show you in this movie mostly is just how you can change and modify some things about where your object is and how it's orientated in the world. So I'm just going to shift and middle mouse just to pan over there a little bit and scroll wheel to zoom out a little bit. I'll also get rid of this little option for my materials by clicking on the close panel arrow up here, just to give us a little bit more space. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this time I want to select all of my house, so I'll triple click and I want to move it into a different location. The easiest way to do that is to come over to the side here, and you can see that you've got a move, like a four-ended arrow. When I click on that, I've got a few different options and I'll take you through those. So with the move, I can then click on my object and I can move it anywhere that I want. If I want it to go directly up into the air, the easiest option, just like when we were drawing shapes before, is to orientate yourself carefully. So if I want it straight up in the air, if I face off to the side, click once and then drag straight up, my line is blue, which can be a little tricky to see, but if I stop moving my mouse, it tells me that it's on the blue axis. And the blue axis is the one that goes directly up in the air. So if I left click now, that is then going to stay in that place, which is now hovering up in the air. So that's one option we can do if we want to shift things around and move. You can also be clicking on different endpoints or midpoints, and you can use that as your location that you're going to move around on as well. So the second one is we'll look at the scale. Now you can click down here on scale. The shortcut also is that you can press S on your keyboard once you've got something selected already. Now this brings up the box. I'll move around a little bit, and you've got different handles that you can click on. So if I was to click on the end ones here, it allows you to do a vertical scale, and also it allows you to drag a little bit to the side. But you can see my window there, that's also scaling at the same time, and things can get a little bit out of whack with that. So it's a handy feature sometimes, but you've got to be careful with it. I'll just undo any changes I've made there. You can do the same on the side. So if I was to click on here, I can expand it out. So again, depends upon your need of the tool you're using. But if you're going to drag it out at the side in this situation, you have to bear in mind that your end walls are going to start getting thicker than your side walls because you're stretching it out. So again, for this situation, not great. So if I wanted to scale up everything uniformly, the corner handles are ideal. I'll go on this one over here. So if I click, that means everything will scale up and down uniformly so that nothing gets out of whack, and it can be a really effective way to do it. So that would generally be the best way to do any scaling. So I'll make it a little bit bigger, and then again with my arrow tool, I click on that and suddenly everything's deselected and it's locked in place. The last of those modifiers that I want to take you through for this movie is that we can go onto the same section that we had, and we're going to go onto our rotation. Now the rotation can be a little tricky to get used to at first because you have this compass, and as you hover on different walls and surfaces, that compass, the direction it's facing, changes to match that wall. So if I want my house to rotate along the green axis here, I can hover my mouse over on this wall, or any of these walls on this side, or even on the end here, because they're all facing the same way. And also, my compass suddenly turns green to show me that it's going to be rotating along that axis. If I left click once, That then allows me to stop moving the compass, but now it's basically asking me, where do I want to start my orientation from? And this can be a handy feature sometimes, but it's not that useful for us right now. So I'm just going to click one more time, and then the next time I move my mouse, things will start to rotate. And you can see that they're rotating around the midpoint of exactly where I clicked and selected my compass to be. So that's important. If you want to rotate further down to the left-hand side of the house, I would have had to have started with my compass being there. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll left click to lock that in place. And if I want to rotate more from this bottom corner, I can click over here, second click to start my compass, and then I can start rotating, and it's rotating it around that point. So I'm going to go it there, lock that in place. I could click over here and do the same thing, and this means we're going to start getting a house which is just really out of whack. All right, so we've had to rotate around a couple of different points there to get to that point. Now, it's always worth reminding and remembering that if you press Ctrl Z, that is the quickest way to get you back where you were. So that will take us back to the orientation of when the house was before we started playing around with the rotation. So if you experiment with these a little bit, they can be really handy features. You can start doing some crazy stuff with some of your rotations. So for example, over here, I'm going to select, double click the top of this object here, and I'm going to go into my rotation. Now, it's not always advisable to do this, but it does an interesting effect. So I'm going to click once to lock it in place, once to start it, and then as I twist it, you'll see that it starts twisting those lines around. So it can be a way to get some interesting shapes in your model. Sometimes it can do some really strange results, so you've always got to make sure that you're being careful with it so that it doesn't stuff up your house design entirely. Okay, that's it for this movie.